Grant Dania now.
It's Grant Dania.
The gold logie this year. Oh my God, it's Grant Dania.
And our mum, Shazzy Dania. She's really crazy.
It's all true.
It's All True, the podcast with Grant and Shazzy Dania.
Oh, hey.
Hi.
Guess what? He's back. We got George, our best friend, with us today, although we didn't make it to the last podcast.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, I'm back. It's so good to be here. I missed you guys last week. Things didn't feel right, you know. It didn't sit well with me for the past 7 days, but it's good to see your faces and talk to you again.
It's funny that you say things didn't sit well with you because we were speculating that you had a urinary tract infection.
Yeah, you had a sexual-oriented
I don't know
medical condition.
after a love cruise.
Inspired by your raunch on the seven seas.
Yeah, I put some unsolicited deck pics up on my Instagram for you all to see. They're for free. They're not going on to OnlyFans. They're just out there for everybody to check out.
You're a given man.
My deck pics.
It's good deck too. Bloody good deck, actually.
Thanks, man. I had a few people on my deck over the few nights on that cruise. It was probably what led to the UTI.
Wow. A couple of people on your deck. There was what was this, the HMAS orgy or something?
I could say so many things right now that I don't think are even possible for a podcast, but it was a good time. It was a good time.
Where
Are
did
you
you
guys
go?
cruise people? Do you enjoy cruises?
No.
I haven't
We've
really
done
done 'em.
any. No. Where
Did
did
you
you
like
go
I'm
to?
not really either, to be honest. I had like 3 days on this cruise, and I think by the third day I finally settled into it and got used to the rocking and the motion and the lifestyle of just the buffet and overindulging.
yeah.
But I love life on the land, guys. I'm glad I'm back.
Oh, were you? Because I think you were taking a new squeeze, weren't you, out onto the cruise? Am I? I don't know if I can say this. I don't know if I'm breaching a personal protocol here.
We spoke about it last week when you weren't here. So
You might want to not listen to last week's episode. By the way, just let you
We
know.
really missed you.
Yeah, might have
You
said
really
some things.
missed me.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
We realised that we can't do this podcast without you.
I got visions of George just being like an absolute, like smooth, like glass-like ocean, and him being on the cruise ship going, "Oh, the waves are so bad," as he falls over and accidentally gropes her on the boob. You know what I mean? Like he's just pretending it's the
They're
ocean.
living together. It's not like they've just met.
Well,
I know you
I'd
do
still
that to
use
me
it.
down the street.
As I'm driving. Oh, these bumps are so out of control.
Look at George's face. He's like, is that even
Yeah, why does
a
this
thing?
car oddly feel like a cruise?
Yeah. Oh, look, my hands are off the steering wheel now on your breasts.
Wow.
That's kind of a bit assaulty.
I save
isn't it?
you when we have to do an emergency stop.
I've
You
got
know,
my
when
own
a-
airbags,
When a
thanks.
puppy dog runs out on the road, I must reach across and hold you back into your seat. That's what good drivers do.
Good husband. It's a comforting and coping mechanism, I believe.
Bloody oath. Great to have you back, mate.
It is good to have you.
Really good.
Bloody good to be here. What are we doing?
Just making a podcast with my wife, to be honest. I could do that. That's pretty much just my life, just living here talking to my wife. So,
It was frustrating.
God.
Anyway, moving on. So you know how we did psychedelic medicine and treatment of PTSD and a whole lot of movement in that space a few episodes back. And the three of us in our off-air, on-air chat were saying that we'd love to talk to someone who had used psychedelics, you know, to change their life.
yeah, because we spoke to a scientist who was talking about, you know, the what the program was going to look like and what the data was saying. But we thought we'd chat to someone who has actually physically lived that experience of psychedelics and what the benefits they believe could be.
So we put out our little, you know, It's All True feelers,
Yeah.
which now has a different connotation thanks to Grant and his like
That's what I
puppy
call my
squeezing.
hands, guys. I call them the feelers.
It's all true feelings.
And we have actually got someone who was quite instrumental in getting the TGA to change their mind. So let's bring her in from our waiting room,
The waiting room.
a very swanky waiting room.
Oh, it's just full of velvet and Coldplay just playing in the speaker system.
Oh, here we go.
Leather couch.
Yeah, easily one.
I forwarded you the email where they said
I think Tanya's. Oh, she's on the phone in the background. Oh, there she
Oh, hi, Tanya.
Hi. I can find now. Thanks, Millie. Sorry, everyone.
Oh, it's all good.
I'm sorry we've caught you mid phone call there. We are recording in the podcast. Tania, welcome to the It's All True podcast. I'm Grant. This is Shezzy. We got George with us.
Hey, Tanya.
Hi, how are you?
Hi. It's so good to finally connect with you because we have been we introduced this topic to our audience a couple of weeks back when we spoke to Dr. Stephen Bright, and we were talking about the changes in this area. Mm-hmm. And we wanted to speak to someone who had experience in using psychedelics to help transform their lives.
Yeah.
And I know that you are from Mind Medicine.
Yes, I am.
And that you were one of the people who was very instrumental in changing the TGA's mind.
Yeah, so my husband and I started Mind Medicine Australia in early 2019, late 2018, I guess. It's our sixth charity, so we've set up 6 charities.
Whoa.
All together. So we're serial social entrepreneurs and we're committed to social change. And so we really started working on the rescheduling applications in 2020. And we made our first applications then and they went through and then they were eventually knocked back. And then we immediately put in the new submissions and they went through, and then at the interim stage they were knocked back, and then in the final announcement they were rescheduled to Schedule 8 medicines, which from Schedule 9, which is prohibited substance, Schedule 8 is a controlled medicine. And that's a really important distinction because it means that practitioners in the states of Australia can then apply for a permit and use these medicines. And in this case, the use is for psychiatrists under very limited conditions with treatment-resistant patients who've got treatment-resistant depression or post-traumatic stress disorder. So in the case of depression, to use psilocybin-assisted therapy, and in the case of PTSD, to use MDMA-assisted therapy.
So psilocybin being mushrooms and MDMA, of course, being, a drug that some of us in our youth might have associated with clubbing. But now we're seeing the benefits of it in many trials, which we're so thankful that the Australian government is also exploring this space and seeing the potential benefit. What was your entry point into these as medicines and usage?
Yeah, I mean, it's really quite amazing because I'm one of these people that's never had any drugs in my life. I've never got drunk. I don't even drink coffee. And my drug of choice has always been singing. And I'm the daughter and granddaughter of Holocaust survivors. So my grandmother, in fact, invented the foldable umbrella in Vienna in 1929.
What?
Whoa.
Yep. We're just about to put on the musical about her incredible life. She invented the umbrella and then she miraculously, which is the only reason I'm here talking to you. And that's we're putting on a production called Driftwood the Musical, which tells that incredible story that my mum turned into a memoir in May and June in Melbourne and Sydney, which is an incredible story of resilience and survival and intergenerational trauma. And one of the things that I was really aware of was, I've tried lots and lots of different things, mantra, tantra, yoga, psychotherapy, myotherapy, cryotherapy, hyperbaric oxygen therapy. I've done lots of different things because I'm a professional performer, and yourselves being presenters and so on, you always need to be in top form, mind, body and spirit if you're in the public eye or in the media or on the stage. And so, I tried lots of different things in my life to just become a better performer. And I just always felt like there's something about this whole Holocaust background. It was so horrific to me when I first found out that the majority of my relatives had been killed in the Holocaust. Every time I still think about it, it still gets me, And so what happened was I subscribed to Tim Ferriss's blog, and he has a 5-blog sort of Friday thing. And one particular Friday, he had this article by Michael Pollan talking about how he was investing $100,000 in a trial at Imperial College for the treatment of patients with depression through psilocybin. Well, I had no idea what psilocybin was. I didn't know what psychedelics were. And I clicked on the link and I read this article in the New Yorker magazine about this trial that had taken place at New York University for patients with an end-of-life diagnosis with terminal cancer. And you can imagine how that would feel for any human being to be told that you have a terminal illness and suffer a lot of stress and anxiety. And after just 2 doses of psilocybin, 80% of those patients had gone into complete remission from their anxiety and depression. Yeah. And they went back to that trial 4.5 years later. And not only were most of the patients still alive, but the ones, and pretty much nearly all were still alive, and they were all still in remission 4.5 years later, which is extraordinary. And anyway, one of the patients who was profiled was a Jewish man who had some intergenerational Holocaust trauma, and he talked about how he'd found peace with all of this and not that you ever forget this stuff, but that you can, you don't get triggered by it in the same sort of way, and you accept what's happened, and you can live in the present without bringing the past into the present, and really making your life less than it could be. So and I really want to live in the present moment. So I said to my husband, let's try this. And my husband was no stranger to trauma. I don't think any of us really are. Even if we don't have direct trauma, we have it indirectly. And his father had committed suicide when he was 13. He'd gone bankrupt, and in that era, that was something to be really ashamed of. And so he took his own life and left his young son and daughter, which was obviously very traumatic. And so Peter just said, okay, well, see if we can get into a trial. So we contacted Dr. Robin Carhart-Harris, one of the leading researchers in the world in Imperial College, who was profiled in this story. And he said there was no trials going on in Europe for healthy persons because we don't qualify for a particular mental illness. And so eventually we got introduced to a guide in the Netherlands, and we flew over there and we had a really large dose of psilocybin. And it was preceded by a dose of Syrian rue, which is an MAOI inhibitor, which effectively stops the psilocybin from breaking down the gut so that the experience with the psilocybin is more enhanced. And so we had this extraordinary experience with psilocybin where literally, again, I'm saying this, like a lot of your listeners will have, taken these substances in the past, but for us who'd never had any drugs in our life, it was like mind-blowing in the best way, the sense of connection to self, to others, to the planet, the sense of oneness. And of course, one of the things that really characterizes depression or trauma is a sense of loneliness and disconnection and isolation. And so to give people that sense of connection is a real gift. And it's in that window, and you can see that behind me, there's these sort of neural networks.
Yeah.
One of the amazing things that happens when you ingest psilocybin is it bypasses what's called the default mode network of our brain, which keeps us defaulting to rigid patterns and programs of thought that are often constructed in early childhood.
Yeah, so your standard operating system of which you don't need to think about. It's an automated operating system.
Yeah, exactly. But you default to it all the time. And so what happens is with the ingestion of the psilocybin, you get this massive neurogenesis and this enhanced neural plasticity, and all the different hemispheres and the different neural networks start connecting and reconnecting again. And it's in that moment of time that trained therapists can work with a patient to get a real window of opportunity to fast track the healing of that patient so that they don't have to keep taking daily, psychiatric medications with significant side effects. They don't necessarily have to see a therapist for the rest of their life. They can actually lead a normal life and contribute to society and have normal relationships. How good is that?
It's incredible. Can I just ask, when you and your husband had this experience in the Netherlands, what was it like, that first day after you had experienced that? Can you just take us through how you were feeling or what your conversation was with your husband? Were you like, oh my God, this is incredible, we need to bring this to us?
We found the answer.
Yeah.
Well, firstly, I mean, going into it, I was really afraid because I'd never had any drugs in my life, and I'm a bit of a control freak, I guess, and I didn't really want to be out of control, but I had decided that I was going to do this, and you just have the stigma and taboo that this is going to drive you crazy, you're going to have a heart attack, you're going to lose your mind, the sort of things that are said about psychedelics. They're all running around my head, and I'm thinking, is something really bad going to happen? But no, it was such a safe experience. And yes, I mean, we came out of the experience and we just said to one another, after having set up this many charities, we've seen, we've helped people with homelessness, we've helped people with disabilities, we've helped people who can't get food or education and all sorts of other things through our charities. But at the heart of most disadvantage lies mental illness of some kind or other, some kind of anxiety or depression or addiction or something. And so Peter and I just said, imagine if we could enable Australians to have access to these treatments. How could that change their lives? And, that would mean that a lot of the charitable work that we do could be so much more effective, because if you can get to the root cause of a person's suffering, you can then help them to get better, to live in the present moment, and then they can start helping others too. It's a circle of reciprocity.
And have you had many experiences since that wonderful eye-opening, introduction to the healing powers of mushrooms?
Yeah, so it took us probably a year to integrate that experience. It was so huge for us. And then we went back and we had a second experience with the same guide in Europe. And it was even more powerful. And that was when we really started to connect with a lot of researchers and clinicians around the world who were leaders in this field, many of whom then, we start to go to events and stuff like that. And a couple of them said, why don't you start a charity in Australia? Because, Australia's way behind. And it was way behind. And so we thought, okay, let's start a charity. You forget, it's a bit like giving birth, It's one of those things that you forget just how hard that is to set up another charity. And so we did set up another charity, and of course it was extremely hard. And out of all our 6 charities, it's been by far the hardest charity for us to run, because the field there's a lot of vested interests in the treatment of mental illness in our nation, and there's just a lot of different types of interests in the space. And
I was thinking that you'd come up against all the big pharmaceutical companies, I'm sure, who,
Which dominate the legislation of the government.
Well, I don't know if that's the case, but I would assume that with so many people, having to take anti-anxiety and anti-depression, medication every day, that's a big business.
It is a big business, but they, they acknowledge that they can't actually fix the problem. No. The big pharma companies have actually stopped even trying to make, medicines to treat, treatment-resistant depression and trauma now. And the current treatments, these treatments, if you've got depression, the current treatments only get about 30% of patients into remission, and they have significant side effects. And if you have trauma, your chance of remission is under 10% with current treatments. So whereas with these treatments, over 300 trials have shown remission rates of around 60 to 80% after just 2 to 3 medicinal treatments with a short course of psychotherapy. And it is important to say to all your listeners, this is psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy. So it's the medicine in combination with the therapy is what leads to the extraordinary outcome. So if you just go and have the medicine or go and have MDMA at a rave party or something, that is not going to do it. And I should also say that here we are talking about GMP grade pure medicine. Rave sort of medicines like ecstasy, for example, are often laced with other substances like speed, and then combined with alcohol and dehydration can lead to bad outcomes. But we're talking here about treatments in clinical environments supervised by 2 clinicians at every single treatment. And that is considered to be extremely safe. And in fact, in all these hundreds of trials, there have been no serious adverse events of any type at all. The worst thing has been, headaches or nausea or that sort of thing.
I'm looking at George's face. George is 21 And
Hey, George.
he's extremely wise for his years compared to what we were like at 21, isn't he?
Yep.
This
If you listen to the beginning of this podcast, though, it wouldn't seem that way, to be completely honest.
She
But just
didn't hear that
forget
bit where we talked about your last date, George. We're excited because he's in love, and that's an amazing thing.
Oh,
And
how good is that, George?
that does different
So
things to
good.
a man's brain. His brain goes to his penis. But
it can change you a little bit. Anyway,
no, but
Where are you based, George?
I'm based up in Rockhampton in Queensland.
Beautiful.
nice and sunny. So, you know, George's, I think, generation they're so fortunate that this kind of research, you know, has been happening. I mean, I wish that we knew about different types
we
of
got to remember,
therapy.
it was happening in the 70s until
Well,
until it was shut down by the government in America
That's true.
during the war in Vietnam, and there was kind of a crackdown on the the culture that was anti-war at the time. So all the LSD research was stopped in its tracks, and it's only really now that's kind of re-emerging again. But you're right, the new generation has the potential to really benefit from this, because when you look at the success rates being in the 60 to 80% bracket, you know, like you said, so many of us have got trauma. Imagine a world where people aren't living with trauma. It's just a lighter and brighter and uplifted and enlightened world.
Brant, you're singing off my song sheet right now. I mean, shouldn't we put psilocybin in the water at Parliament House? I mean, imagine what that could be.
That'd be a very quiet question time. Yeah, I just mean that you know, for us, we've been on a bit of a journey where we've kind of just in the last 10 years started to acknowledge that we had faced certain traumatic events and, you know, and had to work through those things. And I look at what my kids hopefully will have in front of them, you know, with first of all being able to acknowledge that there is intergenerational trauma, which I think is a really big thing. But then
That
also
is such a thing.
yeah, also having different ways to treat that. So I commend you on you know, bringing that back to Australia. But I can imagine that would have been extremely tough given how conservative Australian laws are. Yeah, can you run us through a bit of that?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a hard road, a lot of blood, sweat and tears, I'll tell you. And it's been interesting too, because Peter and I actually have very pure motives to do this. Like, we have nothing, nothing to gain by all of this. We've both had plenty of acknowledgement in our lives and recognition, and it's interesting how people have sort of tried to position us as trying to, you know, make money off this or something like that, which is actually the reverse. Like, we donate our time 100%. Peter donates the majority of his money to the charity to support, you know, probably people like George and others who, you know, have been struggling. And our only motive is to help those who are suffering get better and lead meaningful, happy and healthy lives. And I guess what I'd say is we had to be very persistent about this. So we, you know, had to present a lot of data and science to the TGA. The other thing that we did was that we rallied Australians, and we got over 13,000 Australians to put submissions into the TGA in this second round of applications, which was 10 times the amount for our first round of applications. And I think that really showed the TGA just how important this is to Australians. And then the other thing that we did that was very important was we had a meeting with the TGA where we brought Professor Nutt, who's the head of neuropsychopharmacology at Imperial College in London, to Australia at the end of last year, and he did a whole lot of public talks. He met with a lot of governments, and he presented to 130 people at the TGA. And on that occasion, we also brought a lady called Vanessa, who'd lost her husband of 30 years to suicide last year. It was really sad. She'd reached out to me 2 years before to ask if we could connect her with a psychiatrist to help her husband to get access to psilocybin-assisted therapy, because he had treatment-resistant depression. He'd been given 96 shock treatments, 24 TMS sessions, 19 antidepressants and antipsychotics, and was hospitalised for 19 months of the last 3 years of his life. And she'd kept a dossier of every single medication and expert they'd seen, like it was like a book. Wow. And he begged her every day to let him go. and she desperately wanted to have this treatment, but she didn't want to break the law and go underground, and she didn't feel it was too risky to take him overseas because he wanted to kill himself. And so last year he tragically did, leaving their young daughter and Vanessa behind, and she came to the TGA with us. And I think what that did was that it showed people just how much suffering there is in this nation, and how that lived experience affects everything. And this affects parents trying to bring up children so much, like to bring up her daughter without her father, and to have that. And of course the incidence of suicide, and this was one of the issues with my husband Peter too, the incidence of suicide. If someone else in your family has committed suicide, then it's more likely that you too will commit suicide. So this is a very serious issue. And I think really what it came down to is that there were no treatments that Australians could access legally that was going to stop this immense suffering. And effectively, if the TGA had not made that change, well, then there'd be more people like her husband, Franco, that would take his own life. And I mean, that's not fair.
They're desperate because in the case of Vanessa's husband, I'm guessing it sounds like they've tried everything. And
they tried absolutely everything. And there is a basic human right to safe and effective medicine. That's one of the basic human rights in the human rights charters.
And how, I know that you said you had 13,000 submissions. Yeah. How many of those were from people who were, I guess, had similar suffering stories and wanted this to, to be passed to help save them? Was it?
A lot. So one of the remarkable things was that over 98% of those submissions were in favour. So that was incredible. Many of those submissions were from clinicians and researchers. And then there was, of course, lots of people with lived experience who just were begging for access to these treatments and asking that they don't have to keep breaking the law, because otherwise what happens is people go into a field, think, oh, well, I'll just go and pick a psilocybin mushroom in mushroom season, which is coming up again soon, but accidentally pick the wrong mushroom, take the wrong dose, who knows what, don't have proper supervision. Don't integrate the experience properly. There's all sorts of hazards with that, and I don't recommend to anyone to go and do that. I think it's really important that people take these substances with trained clinicians. They do their due diligence with who is sitting with them during these experiences, and that they do this as safely as possible to get the maximum outcome.
Yeah, you think about all the people that could benefit, whether they be Australian military personnel, whether they be our first responders, whether they be police officers, ambulance officers, fire, people who are seeing horrific things on a daily basis, things that have had childhood trauma and have had terrible things happen to them, who will always and forever struggle to overcome those moments in their life where those bits of trauma were trapped inside their body. This has the ability to lift that darkness and just help them live a life that they deserve, rather than being trapped like a prison in their own body and mind and emotions.
Yeah, Grant, you're explaining that just so well, and particularly for veterans and first responders. I mean, their incidence of mental illness and addiction and suicidality is so much higher than the general population. Like, one first responder apparently takes their own life every 6 weeks in Australia.
Oh, God, yeah.
It's tragic.
And we can't operate as a society without them. We depend on them.
No, we can't.
We pay them disgustingly low amounts of money for the incredible work that they do, and we expect them to just survive in society, like the rest of us. Yet they're seeing traumatic events every day, every shift of their life.
Including nurses and doctors too.
Of course, absolutely. And work through the list. There's dozens and dozens and dozens of careers where that is happening, let alone each and every one of us who has either had a traumatic moment in their life and struggling to recover from, or we've inherited in our bloodline and previous generations, which is, that's a hard thing to discuss because there's not a lot of science around it, but it's definitely a thing, inherited trauma.
Yeah, and I think, Grant, that's a really interesting topic that I'm becoming more and more, I mean, it's obviously part of my DNA, and I think it's part of all of our lives, but I think it's just a really interesting topic that we need to do more work on and learn more about. because it has much more impact than what we think.
Well, if you think about it, if my parents both have blue eyes, there's a good chance I'll inherit blue eyes. You know, that's your DNA is made up of the same stuff. So if they've inherited trauma and that's locked in their neurological system inside their body and that's affecting their DNA, well, then that's going to flood down to you naturally. And then that's not your fault. That's not your lived experience, but you inherit that and that affects your operating system.
And it's so confusing as well. Like we've had a lot of people since we spoke to Dr. Matthew Burke on the podcast about intergenerational trauma. A lot of people reached out to us and they said, light bulb moment. That's what has been going on because this happened to my grandparents and yet it never happened to me, but I still feel, you know, this trauma trapped inside me. So
Yeah, no, you're spot on. And it's that epigenetic thing, you know, like my mum was, you know, even under one when Hitler came into Vienna, then they miraculously escaped. But she was moved around she was behind barbed wire, even in Australia because they couldn't tell the difference between real aliens and people who spoke German. You know, my father was a little boy in the Netherlands. He was moved around as a little Jewish boy from Catholic house to Catholic house. They risked their lives to save these Jewish children. You know, we forget that this all happened, but, you know, history has a tendency to repeat if we don't remember the lessons of history. So we must never forget these sorts of things. And that's why it is important to talk about intergenerational trauma.
It's so fascinating.
Particularly as we're starting to become, we're the first generation that really hasn't sort of seen a large-scale world war, right? Our grandparents did, our parents had lived through it through their parents' eyes, and we kind of
the Vietnam War.
Yeah, and it always worries me how blasé. The further away we get from war, it's you're saying how just before how it's like childbirth. How you forget all the hard parts that come with it.
I think you should touch some wood now, Grant.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm touching wood right now.
We don't want to go back there.
No, thank you.
No.
So what's next for you? What's next for Mind Medicine?
So the big thing that we're doing at the moment is we've just announced, so since early 2021, we've got a world-class certificate in psychedelic-assisted therapies training course, and that's got a world-class faculty of some of the leading researchers and clinicians in the world teaching on it. And we're training lots and lots of psychiatrists, psychologists, psychotherapists, GPs, physicians, nurses, counsellors, social workers, and so on. Wow. We're also, we've announced that we started a patient support fund and we need lots of support for that. So all the donations to that go to support people who otherwise couldn't afford these treatments while they're not on the PBS and, you know, on the pharmacy benefits scheme. So and while health insurers are starting to get really interested in this field, I should say to you all, that's really exciting, but it will just take time. And so it's really important, we believe, to have a fund that can help support people who wouldn't be able to afford the treatments. That being said, though the initial cost of the treatments, you know, may be a bit, one of the things that my husband has done is he's done a deal with a Canadian company to keep the cost of the medicine really low. So then it's just the cost of the therapies and the clinics. And if you think about it over the course of a patient's life, if a patient is taking constant medications and having psychotherapy for years, decades, or a whole lifetime, that's going to cost way more than these treatments over the course of a patient's lifetime.
Absolutely.
So our goal is to try and keep the costs down, to support people who are in need, to train as many clinicians as we can so that anyone in Australia can get access to these treatments without going to a major capital city or without having lots of money. And then the other thing is just to keep educating the population. So we have a global webinar series with some of the leaders in the field, like people like Dr. Gabor Mate, you know, some amazing people that are going to be, that are speaking on our webinar series all the time. And we have free webinars and great events. And we have chapters all over Australia that are building grassroots awareness and just getting the word out there.
Gabor Mate, he was pretty instrumental in our early kind of process in learning about ADHD. He's an incredible speaker.
He's so incredible. But, you know, it's very exciting.
Thank you so much for
thank you for
sharing
joining
your
us.
insight as to where it's up to. We know it's starting to sort of drip through the news now. We're starting to see it in commercial media outlets. It's starting to hit the mainstream just a little bit, very early stages, but things are looking good, and it's great to know that there's campaigners like yourself who's working very hard behind the scenes to change, the very old ways that we have traditionally done things, which are not always the only way or the best way.
No, well, thank you, Grant. The hardest thing I would say, but also the most important thing, is to be a pioneer. And we need to support pioneers in this country because change is hard, but it's essential. So I just want to thank you, and everyone go to mindmedicineaustralia.org. We're a charity, and please support us. We need lots of support and participation. And George, please connect with us too. We'd love to hear from you.
Thanks, Tania.
Absolutely. Tania, before you go, I just want to quickly ask. So if somebody has this treatment, right, and then they have kids, can generational trauma be passed down still, or does it stop once the treatment happens and you are at a point where you're happier?
Yeah.
Before you go.
I don't know the answer, George, because I'm not a clinician, so I can't answer it. But my hunch, my intuition tells me that if you clear the residue and the stuff you're carrying, the baggage, whatever you want to call it, that you're carrying in your DNA, as Grant's talked about, then you'll be able to be a much better parent to your children, and you won't be handing down that generational trauma. So, if my mum and dad had been able to get access to psilocybin-assisted therapy and had it in the right circumstances, that might have been great for them. Not that they're seriously traumatized in the way that you overtly look at them and go, wow, they're really triggered or traumatized. They were not like that, which is lucky, but a lot of people, find it really hard to overcome trauma in particular. But it's good to hear you talking about that, and I'm really excited to hear more about your story. So do send us the link, folks, so I can hear it.
Well, thank you, Tania. I'll never use an umbrella the same again. Knowing that your family invented it, pretty profound little thing to drop on us like that. That's
incredible.
Okay. You know what she called that umbrella?
What?
The flirt, because her and my grandfather used to flirt under it, so it was patented as the flirt.
Oh, that is so cute.
That is gorgeous. That is
Please
very
come and
special.
see Driftwood the musical. Where are you guys based? And I'll invite you.
We are in New South Wales, but in regional New South Wales. So is it coming to Sydney? That's probably our closest.
It's coming to Sydney May, June. So I'll get Millie to send you an invite.
That'd be fabulous.
Well, lovely to chat. We'll let you go about your day. We really appreciate you sharing your insight with us.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
See you,
Take
Tania.
care.
Bye.
Bye.
Oh, I'm breaking all my equipment here.
Wow, that was a fantastic update, wasn't it?
So interesting, isn't it?
I wonder how many people underground have used it.
A lot, I dare
illegally.
say.
I'd imagine.
Well,
so.
I
Like
tried
said,
to reach
it's
out.
old.
Yeah.
It's old technology. It's old.
I was going to say, I tried to
God, it's
reach out
ancient.
to some underground people. That doesn't sound very good. But I did lots and lots of searches.
Comancheros.
No, I did lots and lots of searches on it to see if there was people who had spoken about, the impacts that it had. And we got a couple of kind of anonymous messages from people who said, that they were so impressed that we actually spoke about it quite open-minded, because they had explored it, but they didn't want to speak. They had explored it and they had had huge benefits, but it was in, I guess, illegal settings. So.
But in the same way that she was also talking about her first experience, there's also that association of what are people going to think of me?
Yeah.
This is illegal. These are drugs. So there's so many layers to it as to why.
Imagine going from not having coffee, not even drinking, to flying into the Netherlands to have mushrooms.
Yeah.
You would be freaking out, wouldn't you?
That's pretty crazy. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah. Where did your cruise go, George?
I don't know. I just went over water. It wasn't a destination cruise. It was just on the sea. I also want to clear up. I think at one point, Tania might have thought that I was undergoing treatment.
I think she might have.
And I love the stories
I'm glad
that
you
she
said that because I was
yeah.
going to try and save you. I didn't want to say it to her face because she clearly misunderstood.
I didn't have the courage because she was so determined that I was doing that. Yeah. And I thought, you know what, for the bit, I will commit to taking psychedelics.
But ladies and gentlemen, he's not broken. He's not emotionally damaged. He doesn't have any
because we have
trauma
been
that we're
helping,
aware of other than the stuff that we've inflicted upon him.
We have been helping to traumatize him. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I must admit, I did giggle when she said you were going through a lot and she was happy to hear your story.
Yeah.
Yeah, no.
It might have been the look of the mustache.
Yeah, you maybe
Well,
look
look,
like a
that's-
bloke who needs help.
You might need to like get some treatment after looking at a moustache like this.
Just
Sure.
kidding.
No,
Kidding.
look,
No, look, it's big.
I think the essence to life is just to be open to all sorts of things. You know, I think you can't be closed off to psychedelics because that implies that you think that the pharmaceutical industry has the answer to absolutely everything. Of course they don't. You know, I think there's lots of things that has its place. You know, I think you got to eat well, you got to exercise, you know, you got to make good decisions, surround yourself with people that support you, don't pull you down. You got to, you know, religion for some people.
I was just about to say
music plays
some-
that role for others.
Some people go and like meditate.
Meditation.
You know, and I guess I probably growing up was pretty closed off to, you know, things like not spirituality because I went to a Catholic school, but, you know, enlightenment, and, you know, meditation and I mean, even talking to spirits like we have done and connecting with spirits on the podcast. So I realized that is a really lonely place to be and it's not the way we need to live. So we need to be more open.
And what I like about it is mushrooms and nature. It's natural.
I don't actually like the taste of mushrooms.
Grows in the ground.
We made pizza last night. So we got a pizza maker and Grant said, let's put some mushrooms on it, like normal mushrooms, not magic mushrooms.
Not psilocybin or magic mushrooms.
And I was like, yuck. I always pick the mushrooms
Oh,
off.
I love mushies. How about mushies with spaghetti bowl?
Ooh, that's fancy.
No.
Good idea. I'm going to give it
A
a
nice
try.
little touch.
Don't you think mushrooms taste like dirt?
As a kid, yes, but I've sort of grown into them. I'm surprised to hear a 21-year-old say it, though, because it took me until I was about mid-30s till I was like, onion and mushrooms are nice. No?
Beautiful texture. I love the way it feels when you bite down on it.
It is unusual.
I like champignons, you know those?
Are they the little ones?
They're like button mushrooms, but
yeah.
or the other Chinese one, you know, that isn't, it's like a plastic mushroom. It's not real.
Well, that sounds
Like,
delicious.
You know how it's got a very different texture, but I remember picking mushrooms as a kid on my uncle and auntie's farm, you know, those massive big like field mushrooms or whatever.
The big boppers.
Yeah. And they just, the smell and I don't know. And growing up, mushrooms were what you'd call people who were kept in the dark.
You fed shit.
Yeah. And I don't know.
No, but the science is sort of
The
reawakening
science,
and
yep.
you know mushrooms are an incredible. We have a lot of mushroom DNA in our body. There is a theory that humans have evolved with partial mushroom DNA from plants and then in animals. But they have a connected mycelium network, so they all communicate under the ground, and they can communicate with all living things. So they have an electrical, like a neurocircuit that travels under the ground that communicates with every single other plant and tree and other mushrooms kilometers away. So they're very intelligent. So they can send nutrients through the ground to other plants that are struggling to prop them up. Like they're a very sophisticated organism. Like
Will I become smarter if I eat a
Yes.
ton of mushrooms?
You'll become more enlightened and you
I don't
are
know.
less stressed and you will feel a greater connection with the earth.
I was just wondering how you, like, it wasn't just from eating that handful of mushrooms on the pizza
I'm
last
tripping
night.
balls
that you
now
were-
from last night's pizza.
No.
Man. I'm flying.
How do you know all these details about mushrooms?
I've watched, like anyone who knows anything about anything, I watched a Netflix documentary. Fantastic Fungi.
Yeah.
Or fungi, depending on how you want to say it. It's that's a great, accurate representation, and it's beautifully shot and also edited, and lots of colours and stuff. And it sort of explains the benefits to them. But yeah,
You know, if you had an animal who was suffering as much as some of these people, and I can only, you know, think about some of the examples that people have spoken up about, you know, overseas, you would put the animal down. It would be inhumane to let them suffer so much, you know, like this. Even
with humans, we fight to keep them alive, even though they're in severe.
Like the man
pain.
who was begging for, you know, for his wife and family to let him die. It's another Netflix documentary, I think. You know, he was the ex-army general or was in Navy or something, and he said he'd tried to commit suicide a number of times, and he wasn't successful, but he just felt so miserable. He just had so much suffering, and then he had so much guilt and shame seeing the impact it was having on his family, and like that was just heartbreaking. And then you think, if that was an animal, you wouldn't sit back and let them suffer for such a long time. So we need, and there's lots of people suffering.
Because emotional damage we don't treat like we do physical damage. If there's a physical damage to someone, we put them in hospital and you strap that leg up and you get it working again, right? But there's the emotional aspect to our body, and that can be equally as damaged but far more painful, and then you just can't fix it like a broken leg, right?
Yep.
We're geared for physical recovery, not an emotional recovery, and that's got to change.
You look at all those movies where they do the electric shock therapy, and it seems so archaic. Like it seems like it's from another.
Is that still a thing?
I think so.
Far out, shocking someone into feeling better. Maybe it's like trying to do a Control-Alt-Delete on your computer. It's trying to reset the hardware so it goes back to normal. I don't know anything about it, but it does. It feels like something you saw in a black and white horror film. Yeah, shit.
And it really wasn't that long ago that a lot of those mental hospitals, existed, like Callan Park in Sydney, and some of those really well-known ones that they used to just go, you know what, you're a little bit broken, we're going to lock you up and then we'll just treat you. And really wasn't that long ago. It's just, we need to be open-minded. Okay, well, this just went really dark, didn't it?
Yeah, you really what a mood kill. Holy shit. Let's talk about George getting some on a cruise ship again, please.
Oh,
No.
wow.
We don't want to talk.
He was in separate rooms, I'm sure.
Hey, George, how's it
The
going?
single beds were pushed together. Have you ever done that? Like the beds get pushed together and you got to sleep on two beds and you got like the crease in the middle and you might
Yes.
fall down between it. Yeah, it's
Fall down
not
the gap.
fun.
Did you fall in a certain crease on this on the ship?
Couple of creases. Yes, absolutely.
You
Oh
duty.
my God. Do you know, last night, we've had mice, can I say, okay? So
Are they back? The
Yeah.
bloody mice plague.
Yep. We've had mice. It's very annoying, but I found mouse poo in the bottom of our sheets the other day. I changed our sheets. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the mouse.
They're in the bed with you. They're sleeping with you.
Yeah.
They're getting in there in the night, inside, out, next to our skin.
Well, we think it's a night. I don't know. But it's just grossed me out so much. And we've got traps everywhere, okay? Like
Don't put them in the bed.
humane traps. And last night, Sailor came in and she thought it would be a good idea to not startle me because I jumped pretty quickly. But she did like this, like almost like a tap,
Tickle
tap,
the
tap.
side of your face sort of thing with
Yeah,
the
like-
fingertips.
And
To simulate a mouse, maybe?
No,
or?
just to go like, Mum, but I thought it was a mouse walking up my face. And so I've karate chopped her like fully in the neck.
Assaulted her own 11-year-old daughter.
I was like, "Ah, what? That's how on edge we are about these mice, aren't we?
Yeah.
Like even
It's a war zone, man.
When you made contact, did you think, that's a bloody big mouse?
it was just that she went, ow.
You could have broken her
Mum." I
nose. You could have
know.
knocked her out.
Well, because I'm asleep. You tell me what to do. They don't come to your side. They come to my side.
I've had them on me. I've had one on my arm while I was asleep that woke me up.
What
Yeah,
a kid.
gnawing away
No,
at
not
your
a kid.
arm hair. I remember that episode.
Yeah, remember that little bastard was
my
trying to dig
God.
through my flesh.
So can I just say, we had a mouse the other day out the back and it got stuck in like a big puddle of, like we got like a hole and it got stuck in a big puddle of water. And I said to Grant, we need to get this, mouse out and we may need to send it away to the farm.
She wanted me to kill the bloody thing.
Yeah.
And I rescued it.
Yeah.
I'm not a murderer. What do you think I
well,
am?
I'm not a
Jeffrey
murderer
Dahmer.
either, but no. And anyway, Grant's face was like, oh my God, I'm not going to kill. It was a baby mouse, but I'm telling you,
She's like, just kill it. I said, what? Just break its neck? Or
I did not. And we don't need to go into...
What's wrong with you? Why is that a suggestion?
So Grant released it back towards the house.
It was
Nice.
outside.
Yeah. So it's that night that I had a mouse in the bed.
Yes.
So
could be my fault.
yeah, it is your
Was it
fault.
that very mouse, do you think?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was like Stuart Little
He
going.
was like, I'm back.
yeah, suckers.
This is for not breaking my neck, bitches. I'm going to crawl on you in the middle of the night.
I've never ever killed a mouse, I have to say. So, except on those sticky pads. But only people who have had a mouse plague in their house know how triggering it is to have the smell of mouse urine and poo through your house. It is, honestly, it takes me back to when...
Look, we also have a puppy, so to be honest, we just live in a house full of feces and piss on the floor right now. Even our 2-year-old is like, Mum, wee wee, wee wee.
Yeah,
she
she
spots the
does.
wee wees and we have to go and clean them up.
But as we learnt this morning, she was just going around with her drink bottle making... We were wondering... I actually thought that
she's
the dog...
spotting a lot of wees.
Yeah.
She's doing a really good job.
And I was like, what's happened to this dog? This dog's just weeing every 2 minutes. But
Out of control.
Look, it's a dog the size of a coffee cup. Like, how much liquid could it possibly hold? And we've gone around the corner, and there the baby was with a bottle pouring on the floor, and then coming to tell us that she'd found a wee wee.
It's a little game.
She was staging
The
the
wee
fake
game.
wees.
And you know what? Sunday has been refusing to wear her brace. So, yep. So during the day, we're now brace free. And I feel really uncomfortable when people go, yeah, it's a celebration. I'm like, yeah, no, she led it. It was a little bit earlier.
So she's like kind of in charge of you. She's refusing to put this thing on.
She has become extremely difficult for us to dress, change the nappy of. Like a dirty nappy the other day, Grant was sending me text messages for an hour struggling. And in the end, I was like...
I was losing the battle.
Yeah, she's really difficult. It takes two
How
of
old
us.
is she again?
Just two.
Two.
So she's been the most complete. Yeah, she's been the easiest kid to deal with, most relaxed, compliant little baby, and then she's just the switch is flicked.
Yeah.
It was a nice 2 years.
It wasn't... She's
And
a
now
trick
mum's
baby.
DNA's coming out in her in full force.
Classic.
Good to hear your voice again, mate. Welcome back. I'm glad customs didn't hold you up too long, and you. Yeah.
Nah, it's good to see you guys too. It's good to hear my voice as well. The last time we were, that sounds really self-indulgent, doesn't it? I love my voice, but I didn't have a voice last time I was meant to do the podcast with you, so it's good it's back. And Lifeline 13, 11, 14. Reach out if you have anything that you want to talk about. If anything in this podcast raised any issues or thoughts or concerns.
Good point, mate. Yeah, we covered some heavy territory, but important territory.
Yep.
Yeah, do yourself a favour and don't listen to that last episode, just for your own sake too, George. No, not the one we just
I'm
recorded,
not.
the previous one.
Even though I have to edit it and produce it.
Just press send, mate. Just send it to the podcast gods or wherever it goes to get it up online these days. And
even that off-air part that you left in there.
Yeah. Sorry about that. Thanks everyone for
Noisy.
listening. And if you want us to, explore a different topic or talk to anyone, leave us a review. We haven't really asked for any reviews for a while, and it's become a bit stagnant.
Well, no, I thought that was getting it to the point of being a little self-indulgent, to be honest.
People love hearing, their little bits and pieces.
I don't know. It just didn't quite feel right, to be honest. Just
Well, how many
us reading
reviews
out
did
about
you?
how awesome we were, just so we felt better about ourselves.
Don't listen to
It was a
Grant.
little technique. It was a technique that we had. We thought we'd fill up the first 20 minutes of reviews and then leave the next 20 minutes to just bluff around.
It was
like
due to a
this.
lack of content. That's why we.
Oh
that's why
my
we did it.
God. No, leave us a review with some instructions on, who you want us to chat
on
to.
how to do a podcast.
7 series in. No, we're very honoured that people listen. Like we don't underestimate how special it feels to know that people listen and enjoy the podcast. And just because we're not asking for reviews doesn't mean that we don't love hearing from you, because we do. Because we are, look, we're fragile people. We are entertainers and we have thin skin, and we need validation.
That's not all of us, I just like to say.
George is the best performer, but I did see him in Jesus Christ Superstar once, and I don't know about that.
It was pretty shit. He was Ranger. Jesus was a Ranger.
Jesus, that was funny.
In what world was he a redhead?
That was so
that
funny.
was so funny.
God
And
damn,
actually,
that was
my
funny.
kids saw that poster the other night up at Stanny's when we were up there watching a musical up there. They saw your Jesus Christ Superstar. And
Isn't
pointed
it
you
the
out.
most foul thing ever? A redhead with the tan, a singlet on. Does it scream Jesus or does it scream try hard?
No, it was
Jesus,
incredible.
mate. It took me back. Made me want to wear sandals again and togas. I don't know what they were. Togas?
And beads.
Yeah.
Beads around your neck.
Grow my hair long and just walk on water, bro. Who doesn't want to live like that life?
I wish that we saw you in Sound of Music, but I couldn't see anything.
The lighting man was shit.
One job, mate. You had one job.
Just press the bloody button.
Classic. Oh my God.
Right, mate. Good to hear you. See you, everyone.
Love you.
Love you.
Look forward to the next episode of It's All True.
Bye.
It's All True, the podcast with Grant and Shezzy Denya.
Bye